the opportunity to survey the fire ground, and while there is an extensive perimeter around the fire ground, and while it has many active edges which are being fought, there are many islands of unburnt areas within the fire ground. This means that the actual perimeter of the fire is very much longer than just the outside general area. This creates its own challenges because many of the houses which have been saved are sitting within those green islands, if you like, within the fire ground. And I was able to observe the extraordinary skill of the pilots who were dropping water on the burning edges which were approaching many homes in the middle of the fire ground. They were assisted by firefighters on the grounds working from appliances who were fighting these fires that were threatening the many homes that have been saved. Observing the skill and care of the operation, noticing the way in which the planes were coordinated with the helicopters together with the crews on the ground, all in very smoky conditions and also very dangerous terrain, gives you an enormous appreciation for the skill and courage of the people involved in this operation. Those people, though, are also supported by a band of other volunteers who work back at the staging area to ensure that these people remain alert, well-fed, well-rested. And I want to pay particular tribute to St John's, the Salvation Army, and also a range of community volunteers who have come into the staging areas. The operations will continue tonight and throughout tomorrow for the purpose of containing the fire within its perimeter. We want it contained before the weather changes. We're expecting more hot weather, which will create conditions for the fire to escape, and we would like to contain it within its general perimeter. It would be ideal if it was able to be controlled within the perimeter. However, that will require very much more work. The objective of this is obviously to ensure that the fire does not spread under the worsening conditions, but also to open up as many areas as possible so that people can get back to their homes. Until the roads are safe, access to certain roads will be restricted. These control points will be operated by the police, and the police may ask people to stop. When they do that, we ask people to exercise patience. The police will only ask you to stop to protect you and your safety. I've got a few photographs of some of the circumstances which exist on the fire ground, which explain why the police are stopping people from moving through these areas. This is a picture of a fallen log. This is a very large tree, and that would be very many tonnes of wood that could fall upon someone if they were travelling through this area when that log fell. This is another example of fallen trees across the road. Some of them have been chopped down to allow access across this road, but you can see that up the slope there are further burnt out trees which, even after the road has been cleared, have fallen since the original clearing of the road by the fire authorities. And what we see here is a further log, a very substantial one, which has fallen across the roadway. If there was to fall upon a car, as we saw during last evening when a tree fell on a fire appliance, crushing its cabin, if somebody was in that vehicle, it could cause death or serious injury. That's why the police are stopping people, and we ask them to respect their judgment. Rapid damage assessment teams will continue their work. There's no update on the number of houses lost, which is 12, with 20 further feared lost. But this needs to be put in context. There are 1,041 properties in the area. There is also no update on the number of injuries. However, there are 2 missing persons, one from Chain of Ponds and the other from Kersbrook, and we're continuing our inquiries to ensure that those people are safe. The conditions we expect during the course of this evening will involve little change. The fire will continue to run to the northeast, but gully winds will create turbulence and could mean that the fire could move in erratic directions. The strength of the winds will vary, so the warning that was issued earlier remains in force, that is to watch and act. I'll now invite the Chief Executive of the CFS to supplement my remarks.
As the Premier said, we flew the fire this morning, late this morning, over a number of areas. Given that the number of property losses is quite low relative to the number of properties that, from what we observed, are undamaged, the loss ratio is around about 1%. So for that, hopefully that doesn't increase. Our strategy today is to contain the outer perimeter of the fire, and crews and aircraft are working on that at the moment, including the 2 large air tankers that we've brought in from Victoria. Those 2 large air tankers are operating out of RAF Base Edinburgh, and we thank Air Force and RAF Base Edinburgh personnel for making that facility available to us. The 2 large heli-tacs that we've got operating concentrating on some of the more heavier spots along with the large air tankers. As the Premier mentioned, there are lots of islands of unburnt areas within the total perimeter of the fire, and work is continuing on looking after properties in that area. The second strategy we had today was to work on starting to open up the main access routes into the fire-affected areas so residents can get back home as quickly as possible. Tomorrow we have 3 objectives that will be key to our operations. First objective is to continue to suppress the fires that are on the outer perimeter of the fire and to strengthen the control lines on that outer perimeter. The second objective for tomorrow is to continue and accelerate the work in opening up the main access routes to get people back home. And the third objective is to patrol and strengthen the control lines around each of those islands. Now, a number of those islands are at a couple of 100 to 200 hectares, and in some of the islands there's 5 or 6 properties. So what we intend to do tomorrow is to make sure that those little islands are safe, so if there is any runaway fire on Wednesday when the hot conditions come through, we've got protection in place for that. So that's our 3 strategies for tomorrow, and I'll hand over to Gary.
Sure. From the police perspective, we have 23 road closures and control points in place. Our officers, as the Premier said, are acting on the advice of CFS around the safety of residents returning to the area. The only people we're looking at in returning to the area are residents at this time. All roads in are being assessed by the CFS together with some other agencies, including Department of Transport, and they have arborists as well looking at the condition of trees. It's highly likely in the next few hours there'll be announcements about which roads will remain closed for a lengthy period of time, 24 to 48 hours and maybe beyond, which roads will still be under some type of observation and which roads will be open. We're also looking at bringing in our control points, so bringing them into a more confined area which will allow people to filter in behind those control points into their premises as well. We've had 1 arrest for a person attempting to breach a control point. That took place at Main or North East Road, Tea Tree Gully, and that was when one person who wasn't a resident to the area attempted to breach a control point, and after several warnings by police continued and was subsequently arrested. So at this stage, as Greg and the Premier said, our main priorities from a police perspective and from a state coordination perspective is to try and return people home as soon as possible, and we thank the residents for their patience in this because I know it's trying. And the other aspect is obviously to really have a good look at and finalise what the damage bill really is to this area. Now, a lot of that can't be achieved until the fire ground's safe, so that the people who are actually doing the damage assessment and the people who are on the control points are able to move safely into the fire area, and that once again falls back to the advice provided by CFS. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
So, Premier, those 2 people missing,
Yes.
how grave is the incident? Do you believe they're just out there and playing somewhere, or do you believe?
Might ask the Police Commissioner just to supplement that.
Sure. We had the reports as one's an elderly male and one's an elderly female, one being from Cuddly Creek and the other being from Lenswood area. Now, the information is, as I said, has just come in recently, so what we've got is teams moving to those locations to check their welfare. So at this stage we're not sure whether they are missing or whether they've taken refuge somewhere else, but we're doing everything possible to find out as quick as possible.
When was the last known contact with them?
I haven't got that. All we've got is the information that came in today from people who were aware that they lived at a certain location and hadn't heard of them.
And their residences, are they in areas where fire has gone through?
They're in areas that are being contained within the fire area. So we don't know necessarily whether at this stage the fire went through that particular location.
And do you know whether it was the male or female from Cuddly Creek? Do you know which location each person?
No, I haven't got that. It's male, female, both elderly, and those 2 locations.
Are their families concerned about their welfare?
I haven't got information on the family at this stage.
People who are wanting to go back into the fireground, how do they know when it's safe to do so?
They should continue to monitor the Alert SA website, the South Australia Police News and Information. That has all the information about road closures, and it's constantly being updated in which roads will be open and where the road closures will take place and the control points will be moved. So my advice is to continue to monitor that. Don't turn up at the control points. At one stage we had 30 vehicles at a control point waiting to come through. Now, they were very patient and they eventually left, but it becomes a very, I suppose, a waiting game there in not so pleasant conditions when they're better off monitoring the information being provided from the emergency services and then moving into those locations. As I said, some of these roads won't be open for several days given the condition of the roads, particularly trees and power lines around them.
You mentioned the one arrest. How much animosity are you getting from some of the residents out there who are just fed up and kind of just want to get back on?
Oh, look, I think understandably some can be quite upset, anxious, angry, but in general they've been very well accepting of the advice that police are giving them because they're well aware that we're not doing it just for the sake of it, we're actually doing it for their protection. As I said, that 30 at that one particular road closure, they were all well behaved and they all understood the situation. As I said, they waited for a while to see whether the road would open up and then left. On the other hand, you get every now and then you get some people who become far more agitated, angry and aggressive, and obviously one of those persons were arrested.
Greg, can I ask you about these islands where the fire hasn't breached that's still within the fireground itself? Is that as a result of work by CFS crews or by homeowners, or is it simply because the fire has been so erratic in these conditions? Or is it both?
I'd say it's probably all 3. We saw some homes that people have done lots of preparation to save their property, and have obviously done that before the fire. And to people who've done that and their houses have been saved, you know, that's a well done, and they'll be rewarded for that when they get back to their property. Whether it might have been our trucks and our crews and our aircraft that may well have stopped the fire from running up some of these hills to where the properties are. We'd like to claim credit for that if we could, but it may also have been the wind changes have blown the fire back on itself and other things that have occurred. So I can't give you a definitive answer exactly why that's occurred, but it's something that does happen commonly in fires. There's always, within the outer perimeter, there's always pockets internally to that are, particularly in hilly country, that are untouched.
And would that make things more difficult when conditions worsen during the week to defend these properties within this fireground?
What it does, it actually adds to the total number of kilometres of perimeter we have to treat. So at the moment we're saying we're treating, for instance, 150 kilometres of the outer perimeter, but when you start adding up the perimeter of each of the little islands, it adds more kilometres. So it actually extends the linear length that we have to patrol and secure. And that's why I mentioned the third strategy tomorrow, third objective, is to bring resources in. Now that we've halted the external spread is to concentrate on making sure that those little pockets are safe, because it would be tragic to lose homes in those little islands of grass.
Do you have any idea of how many people have now evacuated?
No, I don't.
Roughly,
No. I wouldn't have a figure at all. I have no idea.